Okay, well, I think we're about ready to start, and if people just kind of join in as time goes on, that should be fine. Before I put the PowerPoint up, I just kind of wanted to tell y'all a little bit about myself. Obviously, my name is Liz. You may hear my dog from time to time in the background. He wanted to offer his moral support for me, but he's chewing on his bone, so he may, if you hear that, just ignore it. It's fine. Um, I have been a licensed social worker since December 2019. And I actually started working on inpatient psychiatric side of things. My first weekend of training was end of March 2020, which was COVID. So that was a fun experience. Trying to learn how to navigate inpatient life and then also the world completely changing. But aside from that, I worked on a female unit for over 4 years. In that time, I saw women from all walks of life and all stages of life, all kinds of educational backgrounds, all kinds of, economic backgrounds, different races, ethnicities, everything. Um, so, I've seen a lot of these women kind of at some of the darkest points in their life, and there were just a couple of commonalities that I noticed. A lot of the times it was that they tended to give too much of themselves and then just crash because they didn't accept support or they didn't want to ask for help or they didn't have any outlet to talk about their frustrations or their feelings. So they were giving, giving, giving to everybody else around them and taking nothing in return. And so that would spiral into, unfortunately, having to meet me in an inpatient psychiatric setting. So I just saw that a lot, and it was interesting to see that it affected every woman from all walks of life. So that's a little bit about my background and kind of why I take an interest in like women's issues and things like that. So let me go ahead and share the presentation. So bear with me. And I might ask y'all little questions. So if you want to like respond in the chat, please feel free. Okay, so share my screen. Is it working? I thought I did it. I'm gonna try this one more time. Share. All right, I don't know. Oh, I thought I had it, Marcus. Share screen. I don't know why it's not letting me. Marcus, you may
Hey,
have.
Liz, so are you? Yeah, let's see. So you're clicking the green little share button down at the bottom of the Zoom settings.
I did, but now I feel like it's disappeared. There's host tools. Share screen. Yeah, I don't see a green. I see share screen options, and then it just asks me if one person can share or if multiple people can share simultaneously.
Right, let's see. So, okay, so when you hit share, is there a little tab that says advanced down at the top?
Oh wait, I think I might have gotten it. Hold on, let's
Okay.
see. Did that work?
Yes.
Yay, okay.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you everybody for your patience. Okay, okay. Hold on. And now I'm like blanking on how to start. I forgot how to start a PowerPoint.
So at the
There
very
we go.
top, okay, yeah.
I got you. Okay. It's been a minute since I had a PowerPoint presentation. All right. So y'all know the title. So Selfless to Selfful, a new way forward for women. Just a couple things. So this is not a one and done deal. The Edens Counseling Group does, I think it's every second Tuesday of the month, like a different webinar. Next week, I believe I mean, not next week, next month in July, I believe it's helping people manage teen stress. So that if that's something you're interested in, that's definitely something to take a look at. And there's also, you can go back and look at older webinars that from the past. So there may be something that you see that you feel like applies to you. You're more than welcome to go back and watch the recording of those videos. Another thing is so Marcus is going to share a feedback sheet with y'all. So at the end of the presentation, if y'all can just fill that out and send it back his way, then that would be awesome. And we really appreciate it. Okay. Okay, so the objectives. So we've got to understand kind of how outdated perceptions continue to affect women's mental health and overall health. To kind of explore the roles that we've maybe consciously or unconsciously preset for ourselves, and to identify ways to break free from these traditions, live authentically, and lessen your overall stress. Okay, so these are kind of some outdated ideas about, women's roles in society. So, of course, number one, women were meant to be mothers, and that was their job. The purpose is the woman is to have children, reproduce. Um, then we have the homemaker, so just kind of knowing that, a good woman knows that the household is her realm, and it's part of her job to keep it tidy and clean and make sure it's ready for her husband when she gets home. And then the next role would be, say you do work, but the expectations may be in a caregiver or a supportive role. So like I know back in the day, it was like, I remember my mom who went to college in the 70s, she majored in secretarial studies. That was a more appropriate, major for women back in that time. Um, you know, becoming caregivers, teachers, nannies, nurses, rather than going on to like being doctors. And of course, all these roles are totally fine. It's just, you don't want to be pressured into them. You want to be able to choose them because you love them. Okay, so just a couple of women in history. Some of these you may have heard of, some of them not. Probably the most tragic story is of Rosemary Kennedy. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with her story, but she's JFK's sister, RFK's sister. Um, she was thought to have potentially have had an intellectual disability and some cognitive issues. So her mind wasn't quite as mature. And at the older she got, her behaviors became more erratic. Um, but growing up, she was a society girl. She went to all of the Kennedy family, you know, balls and galas. Um, was known as to be very beautiful, like fun, energetic, had a good time, was very sociable. Unfortunately, as she got older and her behavior became more erratic, her father, who was the patriarch of the whole Kennedy dynasty, decided that this was not a good image for their family. He ended up not consulting his wife and taking matters into his own hands, and she was tragically lobotomized when she was 23 years old, and it left her with the mind of a 2-year-old. So because she didn't fit into the standards of what the family was supposed to look like, not only did he not talk about this option with his wife, but he ended up kind of destroying her whole personality and her ability to function, essentially. Um, a little bit more uplifting of a story is Catherine Switzer. In the photo here, you can see she was essentially assaulted because she was caught running the Boston Marathon in 1967, which was apparently an all-male thing. No females were allowed to run. She registered under the name KV Switzer to avoid any kind of anybody to catch on to her, and she wore a hoodie the most of the route. And at some point, the hoodie came off. One of the co-directors of the race jumped out like from the observation area and like ran up to her and tried to rip her bib off and like get her out of there. But her coach and her boyfriend who were running with him were able to like fend him off, and she was able to finish the race. And something that I thought was interesting is she ended up becoming friends with the man that tried to do that to her. Like they became good friends, and she was able to kind of change his mind about traditional roles and allowing women into running and marathons and things like that. So I thought that was actually really interesting. Um, and this last person, she's we're going way back for her. So she was actually committed by her own husband because in 1860 that was legal to do. You could have your wife committed. That was a law. That was a thing. Um, and essentially, he had her committed because she started to question their religious styles. He was a preacher. She started questioning that, and she was not acting as submissive as she used to. So he thought, well, we'll just pop her in an asylum. She was actually institutionalized for 3 years before she was released for being incurably insane, which basically meant she was not submitting to the doctors, and her adult children were also demanding her release. But even after that, her husband continued to imprison her in their home, which was illegal. It was legal to have your wife committed, but it was illegal to like hold her as a prisoner in your own home. So they actually went to court, and she was deemed sane. And then she spent the rest of her life advocating not only for, the rights of married women, but for the rights of people that were in asylums, because she saw the way everybody was treated, and it was the 1860s. Like they were doing some wild stuff. So these are just some of the women that kind of broke the traditional roles and had some really unfortunate things happening because of that. So continuing issues that we're facing, just like a note on this picture, this is actually a photo that I took when I visited New York. It is, we stopped, we didn't know what it was initially. I think it was something that was not necessarily planned. It wasn't anything official, but we were reading these notes and we found like a big sign saying that this gate was a place where you could write letters or leave flowers to loved ones who had been victims, of a violent women that were victims of violence. So some of the notes as you read them, you could tell that the person had passed. Some of the notes you could tell like that the people had survived and they were like just kind of giving, you know, um, support. And then this one at the top right corner, the please forgive yourself, is one that really sticks out to me because a lot of women still continue to blame themselves for the violence towards women. Um, so in regards to violence towards women, so the World Health Organization has found that globally, so across all countries, 1 in 3 women have been subjected to physical or sexual violence. And the majority of this is actually intimate partner violence. So it's not a stranger, it's someone that you know, it's likely a romantic partner. Um, so that's again physical and sexual violence. Um, and I don't know about y'all, but I was taught from a young age that I needed to be hyper vigilant. I needed to be very aware of my surroundings. When I got my car keys for my first car, it had a rape whistle on it. Um, for Christmas, I would get pepper spray, and I would get like my mom put wasp spray in my car. So like I don't know about y'all, but that was a huge thing that I was taught growing up is like you have to be aware, you have to protect yourself. You need to know like you're a target, you're in danger. Um, and it really can do just a number on you and be very anxiety provoking. Um, and I know like just talking to friends, male friends, and they can do things like going for a jog at night, not a big deal. Walking to their car alone in a parking garage is just something they don't have two thoughts about. Whereas, I learned to stick my keys in between my fingers in case someone attacked me, like walking alone in a parking garage. So it's just very, very different. And there's a huge disparity that happens. So yeah, we've got the violence towards women. Just general issues with lack of autonomy. Um, I know I've come across many women, both in the inpatient setting and the individual therapy setting, that have struggled to get out of bad marriages because maybe they don't have the resources. Maybe their husband is manipulative. Maybe their husband is threatening to, has more finances or is the one that's working and they don't have, like the females don't have the means to get out of the relationship. So it's not only just marital relationships. This can also apply to, you know, gener like partnerships. Usually there can be a power disparity there. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it lies, in the female has less of the power in that situation. Currently working with, I've worked with a lot of people that are trying to figure out how do I leave this person without being left with nothing or being deemed unfit to be the parent, that because I don't have the resources. Will this person, give me anything if I were to divorce them? So it becomes an issue in that sense if someone tries to leave a relationship or a marriage. Um, there's also, I don't want to get too political, but the new laws that are stripping people of like women of bodily autonomy. Um, there's definitely, I think, a lack of autonomy in the sense that childcare is very much expected to be the woman's problem in a relationship. Studies show that moms are always the first one schools call when a child is sick to come pick up the kid, not so much dads. Um, there's a lack of childcare. Childcare is often difficult to find, inaccessible, unaffordable. So there's that aspect. And it's often times the mom that has to figure that out or has more pressure to. Not every time, obviously, but oftentimes. And it's interesting. So I'm kind of gonna veer on the men's side for this. There's a lack of paternity leave, or it's a much shorter amount of time that men get to actually be at home with the child, than the women. So, even if you do find that you have a very equal relationship, sometimes the men aren't given the opportunity to create that same bond with the child. Or the leave time is a lot shorter, so it's expected, well, you have more time off, so you're gonna be in charge of this, and I gotta go to work. So there's also the disparity there. Um, the continuing body image, self-image issues that women have been struggling with. For this presentation, I was looking at some of those old ads from like the 50s and 60s of all the ridiculous things that women could do to like look better, feel better, tighten their waist. And it's just, if you get the chance to Google just like ads for women in the 50s and 60s, it's just wild. So this is nothing new. The issue now kind of becomes um, a lot more prevalent with the internet and social media. I have dealt with a lot of patients and clients that really struggle to see what they see on social media and not compare themselves. Rationally, they know that what they're seeing isn't necessarily real or isn't really a true representation of that's being given out of the person, but emotionally they still feel self-conscious about like their life. Like, have I reached the same milestones as this person? Like, why don't I look like that person? Why do I not have, why am I not found the right partner? Why have I not reached this milestone, this milestone, this milestone? So a continuing issue with just comparing ourselves to other people, and body image, self-image. And then I think the internet just kind of blew that up because now it's so much more accessible. We have so much access to so many images, videos, information, and everybody can just kind of post their opinion. So it makes it even more of an issue. Then there's mental health disparities. So these are just some like facts about, differences between men's mental health care and women's mental health care. Um, so a man and a woman can go into a psychiatrist's office or a mental health professional's office, explain the same symptoms, but a woman is more likely to be diagnosed with depression. Women are more likely to be prescribed psychotropic drugs, like antidepressants, more commonly found with women. Um, Women are less likely to disclose alcohol use or history of violent victimization unless directly asked, which are two huge aspects that are very important to know in mental health care. And I think that kind of comes back to the, you know, self-image issues and not wanting to reveal anything that's too maybe judged. All right, so keep going on. So some different terms. So human giver syndrome, first coined by she calls herself a feminist philosopher and author. Her name is Kate Mann. It's discussed heavily. I don't know if some of you have all have read this. Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. I have a little picture of it at the end with the author's name. It's a great book, a great read. Um, but I'm going to kind of read to you the definition that she kind of gives for human givers. So human givers must at all times be pretty, happy, calm, generous, and attentive to the needs of others, which means they must never be ugly, angry, upset, ambitious, or attentive to their own needs. Givers are not supposed to need anything. Your body, with its instinct for self-preservation, knows on some level that human giver syndrome is slowly wearing you down. So I kind of think of this as like, no matter how much you do, like how much you get done at work, how much, you do for your kids, how much you get done in the house, how much you get done. It never feels like enough. That can be, a sign of human giver syndrome. Um, Feeling like you have to make sure everybody else is okay before you're okay. That could be a sign of human giver syndrome. This is not an actual diagnosis. It's just kind of a concept. Um, Also, the not accepting help when it's offered to you can be a sign, because that, again, people take that as a sign of weakness. No, I should be able to do this. Like I should be able to do that. I don't need help from other people. And then fearing talking about the negative emotions that you're experiencing because you're just pushing yourself to the limit. So human giver syndrome can lead to a couple things. So we've got compassion fatigue and burnout. So they're similar but a little bit different. So burnout is typically caused by like workplace stresses like long hours, demanding workloads, lack of resources, while compassion fatigue arises is really usually from like the emotional toll of constantly witnessing or hearing about others suffering. So I remember compassion fatigue being thrown around a lot, like during COVID, like to describe what nurses were going through. I know it happens a lot in any kind of like role where you are trying to help other people. So like nurses, there could be teaching, it could be therapists, it could be a lot of different things. Any time that you're like a caregiver, it could be a stay-at-home mom. It could be any kind of role where you're just kind of seeing other people that are struggling. Um, let's see, burnout can be more gradual over time as stresses accumulate, while compassion fatigue can sometimes have a quicker onset. Like it may come from witnessing a one really traumatic event, or can just come from being a number of smaller events. Um, let's see. Burnout encompasses feelings of like exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced efficiency. Compassion fatigue focuses on the emotional residue of helping others, so it can kind of lead you to feel more detached from other people. Um, it can, in a way, kind of reduce your empathy. It almost feels like you, unless this person is experiencing like an extremely distressing event, you're just kind of like not that big of a deal. You kind of brush things off more so than you usually would. And it also just kind of lead to an inability to cope, which unfortunately can take a number of turns. So that could lead to unhealthy coping skills like substance abuse, self-harm, it could suicidal ideation, it could be impulsive spending, it could be maxing out a credit card, it could be there's so many things that people turn to when they just have no outlet. So what can we actually do? So that's part of the part, most interested about. So here's kind of a list. So just advocation, completing the stress cycle, which we'll talk about, self-care, and like boundaries. Boundaries. Yeah. So advocating for yourself. So I feel like a lot of women tend to do this, especially in the medical sense, because a lot of things get brushed up to, oh, you're just having anxiety. Oh, this is just, you know, a symptom of, PMS. This is just this, or it's just waved off as anxiety. Um, so I've met a lot of women that I've really had to advocate to get a correct medical diagnosis because it was just waved off as something that they'd get over or something they needed to see a psychiatrist or a therapist for. At work, if you're noticing disparities in how you're treated versus your male counterparts or in pay, disparities, if you feel like someone's like being disrespectful in public, could be, if you're a student working at school and seeing that there's something unfair going on, just learning to stand up for yourself and speak up for yourself. You could be noticing the disparities around you, and seeing how you can help, if there's any way you can help, just small things. Volunteering can be rewarding. I mean, it's kind of advocating in a sense for others because you're helping others. Always just kind of put like a little star by this because you don't want to end up like overdoing it. Because we're kind of focusing on caring for yourself and not focusing too much on others. But sometimes if you find a cause that you really care about, volunteering for them or getting involved with that cause can be very rewarding and can give you kind of this feeling of, I'm actually doing something about this. So that's where the advocation comes from. The stress cycle. So again, this is talked about heavily in the book I mentioned earlier about burnout. Um, so as you can see with the little clip, so your body starts out in a neutral state, and then hold on, and then you are have a perceived threat. But this can happen at work. So you get to work and something's already off, and you're just like, okay, they're like, all the computers are down. We don't know what to do. And so you start to go into the fight or flight response. You're like, okay, do I just like bail on work and get out of here? Or do I figure out something to try and mitigate this and figure out how you make it through the workday? And then you make it through the workday. Um, Maybe you couldn't get the computers like not working. It just ended terribly. And so you're not able to actually end the cycle. The quote unquote threat is not over. So a lot of times we go to work and we face this quote unquote threat or this stressor. We have a certain response, but we never actually complete the cycle. We never actually have the threat, like get that feeling of the release of the threat. So it's like the stress builds up your body, that cortisol builds up in your body. So there are a number of ways to complete the cycle. So physical activity is a big one. So it could be even just like little stretches, just something to release excess adrenaline and cortisol. So you can, and then shoot for like 20 to 60 minutes daily, especially if it's after a stressful event. There's also breathing exercises. There are so many breathing exercises. I know some of them work well for others, some of them not so much. Um, Sometimes it's the actual act of thinking about the breathing exercises that can be good. But really it's the deep, shallow, slow breaths will physically help you regulate your nervous system and counteract the rapid things that are going on in your body. So it's not something where you take a couple deep breaths and call it a day. It's more so to sit mindfully, do a breathing exercises for like at least 5 minutes, and it will physiologically help regulate your nervous system. Emotional release, or as I like to call it, a good old fashioned cry session. Um, One of my least favorite things is when someone tries to shame me for crying. Um, I am a proud crier. It can be embarrassing at times, but you know what? I've just learned to accept it. Um, there are, limits. If you're crying all day, every day, and you're very easily hypersensitive to things, then that may be a sign of a bigger issue. But when you are really, really stressed up, you have a lot of pent-up emotion, crying can be physically healthy for you. A lot of people don't realize how the pent-up emotions can all come out, and like you've got this cortisol building up. So people don't know that when you cry, you actually release cortisol through your tears, which is the stress hormone. And then it also increases endorphins and oxytocin in your brain, which are happy chemicals. So physically, it is making you feel better. It's releasing that stressful cortisol and like giving you like happy like hormones and neurotransmitters. And when you cry, the parasympathetic nervous system activates. So that is responsible for kind of returning your body to its like neutral state. Um, so that will make you feel relieved, calm, ready to rest, and get rid of some of that stress. So if anybody ever like tries to get on you for crying, just be like, it's good for me. Let them know that. There's also social connection, and this can just be just maybe it's not you don't have to go and have a big emotional discussion with a friend. It could just be meeting up for after work dinner really fast, grabbing coffee, something like that. It doesn't need to be some big social spectacle. It could just be going over to a friend's house. It could be having a phone call, doing a FaceTime, just some kind of connection with others. It kind of helps reassure well, not kind of, it helps reassure your brain that things are safe. Again reduces the stress hormones, um, and it can make a big difference. Um, Another one is physical affection. So this is something new that I learned after reading this book. So a 20-second hug can significantly decrease physiological stress. So if you go home, you see your child, you see your partner, or maybe you just see a friend out and about, and you just have a nice 20-second hug, like that can make a big difference. And just any kind of like physical affection, like hugging, can also signal to the body again that you're safe and you are loved, and that can help reduce the stress. Again, so a lot of these are signaling to the body that the perceived threat is actually over. Self-care, you've always heard the phrase that, when you're on an airplane and the oxygen mask deploys, you got to put your mask on first before you help out others. So this is, I know like throw this word around like all the time, and we do that because it is really, really important. Um, so being able to carve out time for doing what you love relaxes you and heals you. They say when you focus on things that you are good at, that you really enjoy, those are things that can really release stress, that can build up your confidence, your self-esteem, and just give you time to really focus on who you are as a person, and focusing on, your identity, what truly heals you, rather than trying to focus on other people. Um, my, Remember, it's not selfish to take a break. I know there's almost this pride that comes with being exhausted a lot of the time, or pride in being like doing too much or overworking. Like, oh my gosh, you know, I dropped the kids off at school at 7, then I had a meeting at 7:30, and I was on the phone all day, like doing all this, and then I didn't get done till 9. I had to go home, I had to fix dinner, and I had to put the kids to bed. And then I slept for like 4 hours. And it's almost like a badge of honor now for someone to do that. Not so I know that kind of perception, that or the hustle culture is kind of taken a hold. So you have to kind of remember it's not selfish to take a break. Um, I know some people will just skip lunch and work right through it. Some people that like won't take it will like some people will be come to work absolutely sick because they don't feel like they have the luxury of taking time off, or they just don't feel like they'll be judged for it. um there's even like and then again, going to the next, take time off when needed. So if you need a longer period of time off, you can actually take FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, for burnout and mental health issues. Um, so if you do feel like you need an extended time off from working, that is an option that you can take. I've helped a lot of people fill out the paperwork for that. And you could take, I think, up to 12 weeks, just depending on, all the paperwork's filled out, the provider that fills it out, and how much time you actually want off. Because usually it'll have you put like an end date on there. So if you need to take time off, the FMLA will, help protect your job. It doesn't necessarily, in Texas, the company doesn't necessarily have to pay you while you're on your leave. That's one thing to take note of. But you can take your leave and your job will be protected and it'll be waiting for you when you get back. Ask for help when it's available. I cannot stress this enough. I so often hear people say, I ask them, does anybody offer to help? And like, yeah, but this is something I should be able to do on my own. But you don't have to do it alone. It's okay when you have a friend or a family member offer to help you if you need something. It could be just something logistical. It could be, maybe you've gotten behind on some of the stuff at home and having someone come over and help you clean. It could be someone just bringing you, some coffee. It could be someone giving you a ride to the airport. Just if someone's offering help, or if if you need help and you know someone that'd be willing to help, you can even, ask for help. Yeah. And then my favorite, it's okay to not be okay. Um, and I recently kind of made a life choice to stop saying I'm fine when I'm not fine. So if people ask me, are you okay? Rather than if I'm not okay, I'll say it. You know, Obviously, depending on the situations and the circumstances, like if a coworker that I'm an acquaintance with asks, "How are you doing?" I'm just probably just gonna go fine. But if one of my friends asks me, "How are you doing?" I've decided to tell them, I'm doing okay, or you know what, I'm not really doing okay today. And I've actually found their responses to be very helpful. Just for them to simply say, just let me know if you need anything. And that was a wonderful thing to experience. Um, so, it could be starting to accept just within yourself that it's okay to not be okay. And then if you're comfortable with it, it took me obviously a long, like 30 plus years to figure out that it's okay to tell people that I'm not okay. So if you get to that point where you feel comfortable doing that, with someone is going to be supportive, just be honest, be like, you know what, I'm having a really hard day. And you'd be surprised with how some people react. It can be really heartwarming. Okay. And the last one, boundaries. Um, I could probably do like a week-long seminar on boundaries. Um, it is a huge topic. There's so many different types of boundaries. There are different styles of boundaries. You've got people that are, passive and, or people that just have like porous boundaries. So they just share everything and to anyone, and it's can be really difficult, and they may not knowing like the appropriate setting to share things. They often kind of push people's boundaries. Then you've got the rigid boundaries, so people are very closed off. It's hard for them to have personal relationships, but you want to find a good in between. um, I found a lot of people that I work with, both inpatient and in the individual setting, um, have definitely referred to themselves as people pleasers, wanting to say yes because they don't want to upset anybody, even though they know what they're saying yes to is going to not be beneficial for them and is not going to do them any good. So practicing saying no, um, learning how to verbalize your boundaries. So you need to be assertive while also being respectful. Um, and that way it's easier for the other person to digest. I gave some example phrases, for you to look at, like, so I'm not comfortable with that. I can't do that for you. Please don't bring up that subject. Or just plain no. I'm sure some of y'all have heard of no is a complete sentence. And it is. I will admit it's still hard for me to just say no. I usually have to put something at the end, but I'm working on it. There's this website, this not so secret website among therapists, therapistaid.com. It is a website where there's like free printouts and handouts um, that you can do. And they have so much stuff for boundaries. So if you feel like you have an issue with your boundaries and setting your boundaries, they have different worksheets you can do. They have just information on boundaries. And among that, they have a lot of other stuff. They have like other subjects and other worksheets about like anxiety, coping skills, emotional regulation. So it's just kind of a nice thing to have. Um, so that's a great resource. This is the book I was talking about. So it's Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. So it kind of talks a lot about human giver syndrome, and then it goes into other issues that pertain to women. A lot of like that goes into body issues. It goes into things like sleep. It goes into a lot of really helpful information. And they came out with a workbook that coincides with it, like a year or two ago. So you can get the workbook too, to go with that. And that's something that I would highly recommend. I read it at a time where I was feeling burnout, and it was really helpful. If you look at my copy, it's highlighted. Um, I remember I asked for them, like when I worked at the psychiatric hospital, was doing groups. I'd bust this book out and like read from it, and we actually ended up ordering the workbook so we could make copies of the worksheets for some of the patients. So um, it was always it's been very helpful. Okay. That's me. I kind of went over some of my background. Any information you need, you've got the phone number, and then if you need to contact me directly, it's my first and last name, Liz Glauser at edenscounseling.com. Um, so I'm just gonna stop right here and see if anybody has any questions. Anybody? No questions? Or comments, concerns, anything that you've experienced that was similar to what we talked about? Thinking. I appreciate that. Yeah. The website. So and I'll type it in there, therapistaid.com. And it has all kinds of resources. So not just about boundaries, but I mean, I think it also it's like self-care. It talks about sleep hygiene. It's got worksheets for everything. So I've had people that I refer to just go on there and just peruse all the different websites, all the different worksheets that are on the website. You can obviously look at them on your computer, but they're also easy to print out too, and they're all free. Yeah, so the stress cycle, getting stuck in the stress cycle. Yeah. So again, I would recommend that book. So, and there's also if you Google like how to get out of the stress cycle, it's going to give you some of the same tips that I've given you. So again, I think the big one is usually physical exercise. Think of it like this. So like back in the day, like when humans were having to hunt for their food, like there was a real threat there, like, wild animals and whatnot. Um, so like they would generally have to like fight for this animal. They would have to like hope it didn't get into the village, like all these things. But at the end of the day, they would hunt the beast, take the beast down, and then the stress was over. Like you could visibly see like the danger was over. So like the stress cycle was very easily broken. Now we don't have that. Now it's like we're stressed out about, our car battery dying. Like we're stressed out about things that like don't necessarily have a very easily perceived beginning and end. So that's why, you have to do something that releases that cortisol, releases that stress. So like physical exercise, crying, um, the affection, social, things like that. Don't hold to our body. Yes, absolutely. We do self-sabotage because we don't hold to our boundaries, but want others to respect them. Yeah. So I'm trying to understand it, see if I understand this right. So you're not holding to your own boundaries, but we want people to respect them. So it's like a matter of, and I've had this asked a lot, and I don't know if this is similar to what you're saying, but been asked many times, what do I do if people continually just disrespect my boundaries? Um, can you elaborate a little, Sarah? Oh no. Am I kind of on the right page? Like with people like, continually like just like not respecting your boundaries? Am I in the right like realm? Or saying, no, end up saying yes. Yeah, so it's like yeah, that's why I said we could do like a whole week-long seminar on boundaries. And it's something that really takes a lot of practice. Um, First off, you have to really think, what are my boundaries? Sometimes you don't even realize like what they are until someone's actually pushed you to that point. Um, so first off, it's having a strong idea of what your boundaries actually are, and then learning to communicate them in a way that is effective. So like that's why it's like being assertive and respectful and kind of framing it in a sense of like this is how I feel. I feel cheesy saying this, but like I feel statements just because it's very like stereotypical therapist. But like I feel this way when you do this action. So you could frame it in that sense. It's a little bit easier for people to digest when you kind of frame it in how it makes you feel. Um, but sometimes there are people that will, despite you verbalizing your boundaries, despite you wanting, being communicative and repeatedly telling them, they continue to push and push and push. And that's kind of what I feel like it's time to reevaluate sometimes the nature of the relationship. It's like, maybe this is someone that I need to kind of put some distance between. Um, Maybe it's a boundary that you have a little bit more wiggle room and a little bit more compromise for, and so there's a little bit more patience there. Or maybe it's a boundary that you're like, you've crossed this time and time again, and this is a really big one, and you end up having to disconnect from that relationship. Um, and you're definitely all of your worth being self-respect. Yeah. Contact supervision. Can't talk and type at the same time. My bad, y'all. Okay. I think for me, people are used to yes, and so that's another thing. So boundaries can be especially difficult if people are used to you saying yes a lot. Um, it may be easier to kind of to start practicing with people that might be more receptive and kind of be open with, you know, okay, so I've things have been building and building and building lately, and I feel like, you're someone I can talk to, and I just need to say, like, this is something that's been going on that has made me feel uncomfortable. Like, do you feel like you could stop this action or maybe not bring up this subject or however you want to, whatever the issue is? So it could be starting with people you feel like are going to be more receptive and then kind of working your way from there. Um, But yeah, it can be really hard because people get used to you being the people pleaser. People are used to being told yes by you. So it's hard to kind of flip the switch and then people kind of go like, wait, what? Like that's not you. Um, So it's a process, unfortunately. I'd love to say like you learn about boundaries and then you're like a pro boundary setter and you're good at like enforcing them, but it really is a process and like encourage you to practice. And yeah, again, there's like a lot of worksheets on therapistaid.com. I believe there's a number of books about boundaries as well. Um, so I would definitely suggest looking into that. So it's, and then if you are in therapy, it's something that, is very commonly worked on in therapy. It's like verbalizing your boundaries, talking about like potentially how people may react, things like that. So if you are currently in therapy, definitely would suggest exploring, boundaries with them and how to kind of get out of that habit of saying yes. Um, and how to kind of train yourself to be more assertive for yourself self and advocating for yourself and your needs. Anything else? Okay, I see. Yeah. Um, I mean, it could even be added to. I'm trying to. I see your message, Sarah. If I tell my family I'm going away for the weekend for some needed self-care, please only call me if it's a medical emergency. And then they continue to call you about things that are definitely not in that category. Um, yeah. So it may be, when you do get those calls, trying to remind them, like, this is not something that I'm going to be talking about right now. Um, if you haven't, yeah. Oh, you're good. So if you do answer those questions, so you're asking, so if you answer those questions for them, even though you told them not to, um, I am not respecting my own boundaries. So it could, so potentially, yeah, I see what you mean. I see what you mean now. Um, so it's like, yeah, or not necessarily respecting your own boundary, you're not enforcing your boundary. Yeah, does that make sense? Yes. Yeah. It's hard. It's so hard, especially when, you have these relationships. And it may not be, I always like to think it may not be a permanent disconnect. It may just be something that time will heal, but you never know. So it's like you have to really assess like which relationships, are worth it, which ones it's like, what, this is too damaging. So, when you've been disconnecting from your family, that's a really, really tough one. That's can be really hard. Yeah. Yeah, but so it's I like just changing the phrasing. So again, going back to that. So if you are answering those questions, even though you've set a boundary to only discuss, like only be contacted for medical issues, it's not necessarily that you're not respecting your boundary, it's that you're just not enforcing it. So it's learning to enforce the boundary. So it's really the other people that are not respecting your boundaries. But then again, you have to enforce the boundaries and continue to enforce the boundaries, if that makes sense. So it could be if they do call you and they say, "Hey, like, is there food in the fridge?" and be like, "Well, that's something you're gonna have to figure out when I get home. Like, I gotta go. It's this only medical emergencies if you call," and then just kind of hang up. I know this is all easier said than done. I'm very, very aware that this is all easier said than done. That's why it's like you really have to practice, especially if you've been doing for decades, like being the people pleaser, being the person everybody expects to say yes to. So this can be a really, really hard issue for a lot of people. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? And I don't know if did any of y'all need the name of the book again or no? Okay. All right. Well, that unless y'all have anything else, I'm gonna go ahead and oh, there we go. So okay, so it looks like Marcus has sent you the feedback form, so please take some time to fill that out before you log out. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for coming. This is my first webinar. I don't know if you could tell, but I appreciate y'all, and y'all had some really good points in the chat. Thanks so much.